Give her a visitor visa, let her come to Canada, explore Canada, and then they can decide if they have a future. And I was as surprised as anyone, but that application was approved. And so that renewed my faith in visa officers. Hi, I'm Joe Greenholtz from Dr. Joe's Immigration. The most common question I get as an immigration consultant is, what are my chances of being successful in this application or getting approved? It's kind of a nonsense question because you make your own chances of a successful application. The more you put into it and the better it is, the better your chances of being successful. Even if you have past refusals, every application is supposed to be judged on its own merit, on its own particular situation. And for the most part, that's true. So how do you maximize your chances in this way of putting together the best application possible? First thing is a document checklist. Look at the document checklist. It tells you not only what you have to include in your application, but what form it has to take. So, for example, under educational credentials, if you submit your diploma and all of your transcripts from back home and letters from your professor, it doesn't matter because the Canadian government doesn't consider that proof of educational credentials. Look at the document checklist. It'll tell you what you need to submit. When you're putting your application together, put it together in the order of the checklist. Make sure that everything is there. On the checklist will be the forms. The forms are kind of a necessary evil. And one of the difficulties with the forms is that the English that's used by immigration is not necessarily the English that you and me use. So, for example, family member means something different to immigration than it probably means to you and me. So read the forms carefully. I know it's boring as hell. Read every box. My way of working is usually to start an application, then send it to the client to complete because there's stuff I don't know. It always surprises me how many times we have to go back and forth before we finally nail down what the form is looking for. Read the forms carefully. Do your best to answer all of the questions. And finally, an application is not only the documents and the forms. You may know, you may not know that you have an opportunity to put a cover letter or an explanation letter in with your application. Now, this is really valuable if you've been refused before, certainly, or if there's something unusual about your application. Say you're spending your last $1,000 to visit a distant cousin in Canada. No visa officer is going to give a TRV to someone in those circumstances unless there's some really excellent reason, some emergency. But unless you explain that or attempt to explain it, then you're certain to fail in your application. If you've had previous refusals, you should mention them. They may have nothing to do with your present circumstances, but still, you should explain that you applied to before and these were the circumstances, you got refused. This is what's changed. Now I'm trying again. The "this is what's changed" part is especially important. Let me outline to you the importance of the cover letter. I had a client, a man living in Vancouver who had a girlfriend, a fiancée in Cambodia. And he was breaking the bank account. He traveled to Cambodia probably 4 times a year, stayed a month at a time. That means he wasn't working, not to mention the airfare. And so he tried to bring his fiancée to Canada a couple of different ways, once just as a visitor, once trying to sneak her in as a student, refused. And so they came to me and I made the only application I could was to say to the Canadian government, you know, this relationship is obviously genuine. You see how many times he's been to visit her and how long he stays. But this can't continue. I mean, he can't afford this. And the sticking point right now is, how will she react to life in Canada? She's never been in a cold climate, for example. And so it's not the Canadian government's job to be matchmaker, but these are real people at a crossroads in their lives, and they can't move forward unless they answer this question. So give her a visitor visa, let her come to Canada, explore Canada, and then they can decide if they have a future. And I was as surprised as anyone, but that application was approved. And so that renewed my faith in visa officers, that they are reasonable people. And if you have a case to make, that your chances of success are very good. Thanks for watching. See you next time.